evening. It's Jim Hanni. He is the retired Vice President of Public Affairs of the AA Club Alliance, Incorporated, an affiliate club of the American Automobile Association. So those of you that are into automobiles, after we're done. He is a graduate of Washburn University of Topeka and the Prochnow Graduate School of Banking at the University of Wisconsin. In his 30-year career with AAA, he was active in the AA Federation, was CEO of the Kansas AAA, and later responsible for club, public, and government affairs for AAA in 5 states. Before he retired in 2017, he was a member of the Kansas Governor's Council on Travel and Tourism, is how we get him into museums, and served as co-chair of the Kansas DOT Executive Safety Council. He was awarded the 2009 Kansas DOT People Saving People Award for work on upgrading Kansas teen driver licensing system, and was presented the 2011 National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Public Service Award for his work on the passage of a primary enforcement seatbelt law in Kansas. Before retiring in 2017, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Kansas DOT and the Award of Excellence for Safe Kids Kansas. He has served on the board of directors of the Gettysburg Foundation, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, since 2010, chairing its membership and marketing committees and serving as board secretary. He is also a member of the Kansas Historical Foundation Board. He and his partner Vicki live in Lawrence, and he has one son, Brian, a sportscaster. Does anybody know what he is?
Do I need to run right now somewhere?
You might. You're not. Does anybody know what his son is? Ty?
The voice of the KU Jayhawks.
He's the voice of the Kansas Jayhawks.
Don't get a lot of applause.
But he's a good friend of Wyatt Thompson's.
Not a lot of applause here.
I'll add one thing that's not on this resume. I met Jim for the first time this afternoon and Vicki, and we went up to the museum, and it just was an awesome, delightful visit. And he just re-energized me to spend one more night this week with the museum. And hey, if we can get him here, building committee, he can help us with lots of recommendations. So with that, I introduce Jim. Thank you,
Debbie. What you didn't tell you, and I've told some of you, that Onega is really my home because both my grandmother and her sisters and my mother were both all born here, and my grandfather was a station master down at the Union Pacific Depot back in the 1915-16 period of time. So I feel like this is home, and it's good to be home. So thanks for having me. So tonight we're going to talk about what's in a name, what's in a Kansas name, specifically Kansas County names. And that question kind of came to me over the years as I traveled around the state of Kansas for AAA, what was that place named after, that kind of thing. So I kind of got interested in it. And so what I'm going to try to do here this evening is take you through what amounted to about 38 years of Kansas history. And you'll see some pictures of people who you know really well, but you're also going to meet some people who you've probably never heard of, and some you've heard their last name maybe, but we're going to put a face with that name, okay? So hopefully this will be some interest to you. Well, it all started of naming counties in 1855. This is the first map of the first counties of 1855. This happened when the territorial legislature, that was the very first one, and they were often called the bogus legislature because a lot of people came over from Missouri and voted, and so it was almost entirely a pro-slavery kind of a legislature. And Samuel Williams, who was chair of the House Committee of Bounds and Counties on Districts, reported the following to the speaker. He said, quote, "The names selected for the several counties, though selected as far as practicable in accordance with the wishes of the representatives of those counties, were, in many cases, selected more to enable us to just designate the county than from any desire to insist on such names. And if not acceptable, then you could just change them, at the wishes of the House. And that's kind of the way it went for the next 38 years, creating county names, organizing the counties, adjusting boundaries, removing pro-slavery names, and replacing them with Union names. So first, I'm going to take you through the first 37 counties over here in the eastern part of the state, and I'm going to give you a lot of these names didn't survive as county names, but some of them did, and I'll start with the ones that did not survive. I don't have a picture on everybody. Some of this, they're just not pictures available. So when I could, I took a picture of their tombstone. So up in the left-hand corner, the first one is Likens County, named for David Likens. That's where present-day Miami County is in eastern Kansas. He was a member of the Territorial Council of 1855, that bogus legislature, and he was superintendent of the Wee Indians Mission for the Wees, as well as the Piankashaw, the Peorias, and the Kaskaskia Indians. He was a nephew of a guy by the name of Thomas Johnson, who later Johnson County was named for. I'll tell you about him in a sec. His post office was at Westport. He was a physician who came west to establish a Baptist mission among the Potawatomis in 1853, also just simply called the Reverend. But that's his tombstone there. The next one is McGee County, and that land is where present-day Crawford and Cherokee County is in the southeast corner of the state. It was named for a guy by the name of Mabillon McGee, right up there. And he was a member of that Territorial Kansas House, a merchant at Westport, but he didn't stay long in Kansas. He insisted on the right to vote wherever he was on election day. Richardson County was named for this guy, Bill Richardson, and he was a territorial senator in that bogus legislature and commander of the territorial militia and a pro-slavery partisan. Next one is John Breckinridge. Breckinridge County was where today's Wabaunsee and Lyon County are parts of those two counties. He was a Kentuckian. He was Buchanan's vice president and a presidential candidate in 1860 of the slaveholding interest who ran against Lincoln in 1860. And that's one of the reasons why Lincoln got elected, was because there were several people running and he was one of them. So he kind of split the vote up. Madison County was named for the fourth president, James Madison. And of course, we all know about him. That was where Lyon County, most of Lyon County was. It's the first Madison County. Godfrey County was later divided into Chautauqua and Elk, and there were several names for that, where Chautauqua and Elk counties were in the southeast corner of the state. But the first name was Godfrey for that place, named for Francis Godfrey up here in the corner. He was a mixed blood trader and chief of the Miami tribe of Indians in Indiana. Davis County, down here on the bottom row, was named for Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, and that later became Geary County. I'll talk about Geary in just a little bit. Weller, let's see, Weller County, the second one in on the bottom row here, John B. Weller. That was the first name put on Osage County, and he was a congressman and governor from Ohio, also governor of California, a senator there, minister to Mexico, most importantly to the 1855 legislature, who put a name on Osage, where Osage County is today. He was a staunch Democrat at all times, so they wanted to honor him with a county. The next guy along the line there is Henry Wise. Wise had his name put on what is today Morris and Chase counties in Kansas. Temporarily honored Virginia Governor Henry Wise. About his last official act was to hang John Brown. So that's Governor of Virginia Henry Wise, honored in Kansas. The next guy along here, Robert Mercer Taliaferro Hunter. That was the original name put on what today is Cowley and southern Butler counties. He was thought to be let's see, he was a U.S. Senator from Virginia as well, who opposed the use of U.S. troops to enforce the bogus pro-slavery laws in Kansas. He favored making a death penalty for certain offenses against the rights of slaveholders. He favored admission of Kansas under the Lecompton Constitution and was a candidate for president before the National Democratic Convention in 1860. So you see this trend of all these pro-slavery people, and we'll kind of follow that along as it changes over time. Next to the last county is Dorn County. That was the original name put on what today is Neosho and Labette counties in southeast Kansas, most likely named in honor of Andrew Jackson Dorn, a Mexican war veteran, Indian agent for the Osages, the Quapaws, and the Senecas and Shawnees at the Neosho Agency from 1853 to 1861. It's also possible it could have been named for Earl Van Dorn. There's no conclusive evidence about it. I had a picture of Earl Van Dorn, so I put him up here, but the consensus is more like it would be Andrew Jackson Dorn. And that, again, is on Neosho and Labette counties originally. Finally, what we know as Jackson County today was first called Calhoun County. And it says John Calhoun. That wasn't the senator from South Carolina who championed states' rights back before the Civil War. This is John Calhoun in Kansas. He was the first Surveyor General of the state of Kansas. He was an anti-abolitionist, a staunch Democrat, a close friend of Stephen Douglas, of Lincoln-Douglas debates, the guy that ran against Lincoln in 1860. But he was a real close friend of Douglas, and Douglas asked him to come out here and do that work. And so he had his name put on what is today Jackson County. Of the 1855 county names that survived, here's Thomas Johnson. Here's Thomas Johnson up here in the left-hand corner. Everybody heard of Shawnee Mission, Kansas? Well, that's named. That was his mission. Shawnee Mission was Thomas Johnson's mission. That's where he lived. He was a member of that first territorial legislature as well. He was a Methodist minister who established mission among the Shawnees in 1829. He took the pro-slavery side of politics initially, but when the war came, he was a faithful Union man, and he then lived on the Missouri side and became obnoxious to the bushwhackers, the pro-slavery people, and they ended up killing him over there. So he went from one side to the other side, and then that kind of did him in. The second guy up there, Lewis Lynn, he was a distinguished late U.S. Senator from Missouri. I mentioned David Likens at the very beginning. That was changed to Miami County pretty much right off the bat after Likens' name was on. They took it off and named Miami County after the Miami Indians. And then you have the name up here of Stephen Douglas. His name was put on where Lawrence is now. He was Lincoln's opponent in the election of 1860. He was a champion of the notion of the idea of popular sovereignty, the notion that that the people out in Kansas could decide for themselves whether they wanted Kansas to be a free state or a slave state. And of course that's why there was so much fighting out here back and forth, and it was called Bleeding Kansas. Probably he was more responsible for that than anybody else, Stephen Douglas. Then of course the next one is Benjamin Franklin up here. That's obvious for Franklin County. Anderson County, also in southeast Kansas, I don't have a picture of Anderson, but it was named for Joseph C. Anderson, a Missouri man who was Speaker pro tem of that bogus legislature. His name appears in connection with proposition to march under the black flag to Lawrence. Tried as I may, I just couldn't find a picture of him, but he was originally from Louisville, Kentucky. I even went to Louisville, Kentucky to try to find, I couldn't find a picture. The next guy on the end here is Ohio Senator William Allen, and that's where Allen County was named for. He was a Stephen Douglas ally, and he favored the most ultra measures for the perpetuation of slavery. So there were some of these names that were pro-slavery names that didn't go away. Allen is one of them. The next one is, well, of course there was Shawnee County was named, and that was named for the Indian tribe, of course. But you might find it interesting to know that the name Shawnee prevailed for where Topeka is because the county was the land of the Shawnee, and before an 1854 treaty, and a guy by the name of Hiram Strickler of Tecumseh, Kansas, really spoke for it and claimed the name of Shawnee for that county, a preference that was strongly wanted by Thomas Johnson for where he was over on the eastern side of the state. But the committee yielded to Strickler, and without solicitation, they complimented Reverend Johnson by saying, well, hey, we'll name that area where you're at after you. They said, okay. So that took care of that. On the bottom row here, we've got Asbury A.M. Coffee, and that's who Coffee County was named for. He was a member of the bogus legislature. Wilson County honored this second guy, Hiro T. Wilson, who was the first settler at Fort Scott, Kansas. The next one over here is Daniel Woodson, and he was the secretary of the Kansas Territory at that time. So he was like an officer of the bogus legislature. The next one here, Colonel Alfred B. Greenwood, was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs at the time, and he had his name fixed on Greenwood County. Butler County was named for this guy right down here, South Carolina Senator Andrew P. Butler, who was a bitter partisan, a zealous advocate of the right of the South to introduce slavery in the territory of Kansas, and yet that name also survived, and I think it's the largest landmass county in the state of Kansas, but it was named after a Southern sympathizer there. So, okay, let's see. Not to be outdone. I forgot to mention, Irving County was originally where Butler County was, just for a short while. He was, of course, a famous author, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Rip Van Winkle, that kind of thing. But his name was put on that county just before Butler was. Okay. Not to be outdone, Senator from Missouri, David R. Atchison. He was also a strong advocate for Kansas to come in as a slave state. And he was a U.S. Senator from Missouri, President of the U.S. Senate when Kansas became a territory. He was an ardent pro-slavery Democrat and partisan leader of advancing the interests of slavery in Kansas. He was also conspicuous among the mob at the sacking of Lawrence in May of 1856. The next guy over here is Doniphan, Alexander Doniphan. Doniphan County in the extreme northeast corner of Kansas was named for him. He was the commander of a regiment of cavalry during the Mexican War. He also helped conquer New Mexico, and he was also a zealous partisan for extending slavery into Kansas. There's another name that survived after the Union people got in, after the state became a free state. The next one is Leavenworth County. That was named for the most important military post in the West, Fort Leavenworth, but the fort was named for U.S. Army General Henry Leavenworth, who's pictured here. Brown County was named for Albert G. Brown, U.S. Senator from Mississippi, and he withdrew as a senator from Mississippi at the same time Jefferson Davis said goodbye in the Senate and became the Confederate president right at the beginning of the Civil War. The next one, of course, is Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson County was named for him, but I think you'll find it interesting that it almost became called Sauterelle instead of Jefferson County. Sauterelle, which is a French word for grasshopper. Any of you familiar with?
Grasshopper Falls.
Exactly. So that's where the name kind of originated from. Sauterelle was what Jefferson County was originally going to be. Nemaha County was named for the river that flows through Nemaha County and on up into Nebraska. Let's see. Riley County was named for the adjacent military post where it's located, established 2 years earlier in 1853 and named for U.S. Army General Bennett C. Riley, pictured down here. And he led the first military escort along the Santa Fe Trail. Marion County, the next one over here, was named for the Revolutionary War hero Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. I don't know where they got that, but that's Marion County became one of the first counties to really get organized fairly well. Of course, Washington County, nearby here, was named for the nation's first president. And the last one down here in the right-hand corner, Marshall County, was named for General Frank Marshall, who established a ferry on the Big Blue River at the crossing the old Independence California Road in 1849. He was a prominent member of that bogus legislature and had his own name applied to the county. So, let's see. Also, I wanted to show you a picture of the Kansas map. This is what it began to look. This is the next iteration of what Kansas looked like from a county standpoint. So also formed shortly thereafter were the counties of Montana. Let's see, is that up there? Montana County, El Paso County, Oro County right here, Broderick County down here, and this one of Fremont County. Most of those counties were created in what is present-day Colorado. The latter two were named for Californians. The first one, David Broderick, right here, a Democrat U.S. Senator from California who opposed the admission of Kansas under the Lecompton pro-slavery Constitution and became separated from his own party on the slavery question later in 1868. Fremont County was named for John C. Fremont, the Western explorer, Union general, and first Republican presidential nominee in 1856. You know, everybody kind of wants to think about Lincoln was the first Republican. Actually, it was this guy right here. He ran 4 years earlier when the Republican Party first got started. Let's see, Oro was a Spanish name for gold, as gold was discovered along the South Platte River in 1858, just a few years later. These 5 counties all went away when Kansas entered the Union, and with these counties west of the 25th meridian, they reverted to unorganized territory again, some to be organized later as part of Colorado. For example, El Paso County, that I mentioned earlier, that is El Paso County, Colorado today, and the county seat is Colorado Springs. So, kind of interesting how some of these things don't change very much. By 1857, the survey had progressed so far that it was possible to bound the eastern counties by township and section lines. And now you start to see kind of a shift away from these pro-slavery namesakes to some extent. Pottawatomie, our county here, Clay, Dickinson, and Jackson counties were created. Pottawatomie, of course, for the Indian tribe. Clay was named for this man up here in the left-hand corner, U.S. Senate compromiser from Kentucky, Henry Clay, one of the most famous. I think he ran for president several times, just never got elected. Dickinson was named for Daniel Dickinson up here. He was a senator from New York, and in 1847, he had introduced resolutions embodying popular sovereignty, what I mentioned earlier, later incorporated in the bill for organizing the Kansas Territory. Andrew Jackson had his name put on one of the counties, Jackson County, our nation's 7th president. And then during the 1859 territorial session, several more new counties were created and organized. Wyandotte and Osage, again named for Indian tribes. Wyandotte had originally been named Shelby County, and this is the name it was put on for originally, Joe Shelby. He was a Confederate general. Chase County was named for this man down here, Salmon P. Chase. He was Lincoln's Treasury Secretary, Governor and Senator from Ohio, and eventually U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice. He earnestly opposed the extension of slavery into Kansas. And then the pro-slavery name of Richardson was replaced at that time with Wabaunsee for Wabaunsee County, honoring the chief of the Potawatomi, and there he is right there, Chief Wabaunsee. And Morris County honored Ohio U.S. Senator Tom Morris, sorry about that, who distinguished himself in 1832 as an opponent of slavery. So there's another one. In 1860, 7 new counties were created, several of which survived to permanency. One of them, in 1861, Lyon County was established, named for this man here, General Nathaniel Lyon. He was a Civil War general who led the Lyon County soldiers at the Battle of Wilson's Creek. And he was killed there, actually. Let's see. Then the Republic County, up here along the Nebraska border, was named after the Republican River, which flowed through the county. However, the river was so called because many years earlier, the valley of that stream was referred to as the Pawnee Republic, the river of the Pawnee, if you will. It was not named for the Republican Party. I always thought the Republican River was named for that, but no, it was named for the Pawnee Republic. Ottawa County was created to honor the Indian tribe, as was Cherokee County in 1868, which replaced the pro-slavery names of McGee down here. So first, this was all Cherokee, and very soon you'll see this is divided in half and another name put on it. Saline, of course, was named after the river that flows through it, and as was Neosho County. Where's Neosho? So there it is down here in the southeast corner as well. What later became Cloud County was first named Shirley, right here. Most likely named for William Shirley, who was governor of Massachusetts colony back in the 1700s, but Andreas's History of Kansas asserts it was a joke named for Jane Shirley, a lady of questionable character in the Leavenworth area. By request of the first representative there, J.B. Roop, the name was changed to Cloud County, and I'll show you a picture of Cloud here in just a second. Also in 1860, Picatin County, this whole southwest quarter of Kansas, was made a county. It was at least named anyway, possibly named from a Sac Indian word meaning flat land. Good name for it. It was never organized as a county, but became part of Marion County in 1867. Okay, then in 1867, with the Civil War in the rearview mirror, 35 more new counties were established and created. This is a map, just shows you how many more counties were on there. Crawford County, honoring then Governor Samuel Crawford, was where they split that county in the southeast corner of the state at the bottom. Named for then Governor Samuel Crawford. Ellsworth County was named after Fort Ellsworth, this guy. The Fort Ellsworth was named after him, Lieutenant Ellsworth, who built the fort. He was lieutenant of the 7th Iowa Cavalry, but there's a picture of him. And then in the spring of 1866, there was a great rush of immigration to a place called Labette. And the new settlers proceeded to organize a government of their own. They gave the name La Bête, which is French for the beast, called a convention, nominated a full set of county officers and a representative to the state legislature, and started a county government, all of which they didn't have any authority to do. The representative, Charles Bent, went to Topeka with a petition asking Bent to be admitted to the Kansas House, which he was. Then he introduced a bill to organize and define the boundaries of Labette, which passed. So pretty simple, really. But Labette County was named after Labette Creek, which is a large stream, largest one in the county, except for the Neosho River that flows through it. According to conflicting traditions, the creek either obtained its name from the French trader Pierre Labette, or, more likely, from this incident. In the year 1845, some French trappers pitched their camp near a crossing of this creek a few miles above the confluence of the Neosho River. And a meal was prepared, and the Frenchman had sat down to partake of it when a deer came into sight. A general chase ensued, as you can imagine, and the deer was killed. During the absence of the trappers from the camp, in pursuit of the deer, a polecat. Anybody know what a polecat is?
Skunk.
Yep. Skunk comes into the camp, and he made himself so disagreeable that they all returned and then took off again. One of them, who knew the cause of the difficulty right off the bat, exclaimed as he turned away, "Oh, la bête, la bête, the beast, the beast." And so that's where the name supposedly came from. The Frenchman just, and it stuck. But for a long time they had it into two words, la bête, but then over time they just combined it into just one word. And today it's Labette County. Richard Montgomery is pictured here. He's the next one. Montgomery County was also created in 1867 out of part of the original Wilson County. And it was named for he was a general of the American Revolution. He was killed on the plains of Quebec during the American Revolution in 1775. Also then created, this is a big year, 1867. Also created honoring soldiers of various rank from private to general in either the Kansas infantry or cavalry regiments that were killed in the Western theater of the Civil War in the Union cause were Cloud, there he is, there's Cloud County, William Cloud, Lieutenant Matthew Cowley, Cowley County in south central Kansas, Jewell County in north central Kansas, Lieutenant Lewis Jewell. Don't have a picture of Captain William Mitchell, but Mitchell County is where Beloit is. General Jesse Reno, Reno County, Hutchinson. And I've got a story to tell you about Reno. Marion Harper, Harper County. Nathan Smith, Smith Center, right? Vincent Osborne, Osborne County in northwest Kansas. Alva Russell, Russell, home of Bob Dole, right? Captain Lewis Stafford, Stafford County, and Pratt County. Also, Private John Rooks, I couldn't find a picture of him, but there's his marker. Rooks County is where Stockton is. George Ellis, that's where Hayes is, Lieutenant George Ellis. Orloff Norton, Norton County, also in northwest Kansas. Captain John Graham, Graham County in western Kansas. Edgar Trigo, everybody knows where Waukene is, that's Trigo County. Edgar Trigo. Noah Ness, Ness City out in western Kansas. Charles Clark, they dropped the E, he was really Clark with an E, down in southwest Kansas. Captain Amos Hodgman had a county named for him, that's where Jetmore is. And then James Ford down here, that's where Dodge City is, Ford County. And then in 1868, Captain Grenville Gove had his name put on Gove County out in western Kansas. That was really a big year for county naming. Reno, I wanted to go back to Reno because he has kind of an interesting story about him. He's one of the generals and not a private, right? On September 12, 1862, Reno's command of the 9th Union Army Corps in the Civil War, and he spent the day in Frederick, Maryland as the Army of the Potomac under Major General McClellan advanced westward in pursuit of Robert E. Lee during the Battle of South Mountain campaign that preceded the major Battle of Antietam. Ever heard of Battle of Antietam? On September 14th, Reno stopped directly in front of his troops as he reconnoitered the enemy forces advancing up the road at Fox's Gap. He was a real soldier. He liked to get out there in front and lead. And he was shot in the chest by a rookie Union soldier from the 35th Massachusetts who mistook him for a rebel cavalryman at dusk. He was brought by a stretcher to Brigadier General Samuel Sturgis's command post and said in a clear voice as he was carried in, "Hello, Sam, I'm dead." Sturgis, a longtime acquaintance of Reno's and fellow member of the West Point class of 1846, thought he sounded so natural that he must be joking and told Reno that he hoped it was not as bad as all that. And Reno simply repeated and said, "Yes, yes, I'm dead, Sam. Goodbye." And he died a few minutes later. So they wanted to honor him, and so Hutchinson's County is Reno County, honoring him. Now, the big-time generals that were also named that same year include these fellows up here. General James McPherson, he was commander of the Army of the Tennessee. He was a real favorite of General Sherman's, but he got separated from his troops and was ambushed and killed during the Battle of Atlanta. General John Sedgwick was a general from Connecticut. He was also at Gettysburg, killed at Spotsylvania Courthouse in 1864. Wallace County, the next guy in here, was named for William H.L. Wallace. That Wallace County is out on the Colorado border in western Kansas. But it's not to be confused with General Lew Wallace, who wrote the book Ben-Hur. They were both at Shiloh in 1862, both of the Wallace generals. However, Wallace County is named for William H.L. Wallace, who was mortally wounded leading his troops during the awful pounding the Union Army took the first day at Shiloh in 1862. Sumner County up here was named for Charles Sumner, Massachusetts senator, leader of the opposition to extend slavery to Kansas in 1854. Lincoln, of course, is obvious. Lincoln's out it's in central Kansas. Barton County, over here, that was named for Clara Barton, the only woman for whom a Kansas county was named. Now, Jane Shirley, remember, had her name on Cloud County earlier, but it didn't survive. So this is the only woman for whom a Kansas county was named. And the next two ones I will tell you about here are martyrs. There are only two martyrs among the Kansas county names. Thomas Barber, and he was, let's see, Barber County is along the Oklahoma border in southwestern Kansas. He was a Free State settler in Douglas County who was killed in consequence of the political troubles near Lawrence in 1855. And Phillips County, named for William C. Phillips, he was also a Free State martyr. He was tarred and feathered by bushwhackers and then murdered at Leavenworth in 1856. The next guy over here, General Samuel Rice, Rice County, where Lyons, Kansas is. He was killed in 1864 at Jenkins Ferry, Arkansas. Also that year, Pawnee County, Kiowa County, and Comanche counties, all kind of in the southwest part of the state, all named for Indian tribes, were also created in 1867. So that's all that happened in 1867. Big year for county naming. Between 1869 and 1872, 16 counties previously created were organized, and Harvey County was created and organized out of the northern part of Sedgwick County, named for Kansas's fifth governor, right here, James Harvey. He was also a United States Senator as well. But that's just north of Wichita, Harvey County. Okay. Then in 1873, the remaining part of the state was divided up, creating 22 more counties. And so you can see it's all filled in now. We've still got a lot of work to do to get them right, but everything in the state has a county name on it. The first one I want to talk about is Decatur County. It's in northwest Kansas. It honored Stephen Decatur, a distinguished American naval officer. Cheyenne and Wichita counties were put on county names to two of the region's Indian tribes. And then Sheridan, Sherman, General Phil Sheridan there, William Tecumseh Sherman, General George Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, General Ulysses S. Grant, General George Meade, the sort of hero of Gettysburg, General Philip Kearny, General Winfield Scott. These were all great Union generals of the Civil War, all had their names put on Kansas counties, as was the first guy here on the next page, General John Rawlins, who was Grant's Chief of Staff General during the Civil War, and later his Secretary of War during his presidency. John Rawlins probably had more to do with whatever Ulysses S. Grant got right as president and in war as anybody, John Rawlins, but not very many people know about him. But his name is on a county in extreme northwest Kansas. James Lane. Here we go with the politicians, right? Senator James Lane, one of the first senators in Kansas, had his name put on a county in western Kansas. He was very much a jayhawker, free state abolitionist, very active militarily as well as politically. Seward is a name that was put on, remember Godefroy? I mentioned Godefroy County. Seward was put on Godefroy County a little later on, but it ended up in southwest Kansas. It was a name of a former governor and senator of New York and Lincoln's Secretary of State. He actually is the guy who helped purchase Alaska. Anybody heard of Seward's Folly, Alaska? There he is, William Seward. And he was one of Lincoln's rivals for presidency in 1860. But Lincoln put him on his cabinet and was one of his closest advisors. And then the next guy here, Pennsylvania Senator Thaddeus Stevens, had his name put on a county in southwest Kansas. You may remember him from the movie Lincoln. His character was played by Tommy Lee Jones in the movie Lincoln. Edwin M. Stanton, his name was put on a county in southwest Kansas. He was Lincoln's war secretary down here. Horace Greeley, who was the editor of the New York Tribune, Union newspaper during the Civil War. Horace Greeley, famous for saying, "Go west, young man, go west." That's him. And southwest Kansas. And also in southwest Kansas, Alexander Hamilton, one of the nation's founders, his name was put on a county out there too. There were several counties, several counties were given names that year that disappeared later. Buffalo for the bison on the plains. And then this guy right here, Andrew Foote, had his name put on a place that later became Gray County. It was originally named for him, Andrew Hull Foote, a Union naval officer in the Civil War who figured prominently in Grant's victories at Fort Henry and Donelson. Arapahoe County, where is it? There it is right there. Arapahoe and Kansas counties down here in the southwest corner were also named at that time. And then Sequoyah County right here. That was Buffalo and Sequoyah they later became Finney County, and Arapahoe became what today is known as Haskell County, and Kansas County down here in the southwest corner later became Morton County, and I'll talk about those names in just a second. The difficulties in organizing counties have no better example than demonstrated by invading speculators who turned their eyes in southwest Kansas in the early 1870s to a fruitful field of plunder. These four counties here in the summer of 1874, Barber, Comanche, Ford, and Ness counties were organized for bond voting purposes. The law required that there should be at least 600 bona fide inhabitants in any one county before you could actually organize it. That's what the law required. There was not a fourth of that number in any one of those counties, but a sprinkling of inhabitants offered no serious obstacle to the organizers, according to T.A. McNeil, who wrote about it in the Kansas Historical Collections of 1901. These speculators were people, he said, who were strangers to anything that resembled in the most remote degree a conscience. Old hotel registers were easy to obtain, and names were soon copied by the organizing enumerators. Immediately following the county organization, these financiers began to work the mine that they had opened. They issued bonds on school districts that never had an existence except in the fertile imaginations of the scoundrels who issued the bonds, voted scrip to build bridges over streams that, except in times of sudden and heavy rains, did not carry sufficient moisture to make a respectable sized dewdrop. They issued scrip by the thousands of dollars for the support of the poor, and there being no poor, they took it on themselves to represent the unfortunate citizens who were supposed, in theory, to reside in the county in a condition of abject and helpless poverty. $40,000 was saddled on the county of Barber and a like amount on the county of Comanche, ostensibly for the purposes of building courthouses, but never a brick was laid or a foundation stone set for either temple of justice. In Barber County, T.A. McNeil said, $100,000 in bonds were voted for a railroad that was supposed to begin somewhere in the neighborhood of the Aurora Borealis and terminate where it would collide with the Tropic of Capricorn. As a matter of fact, the road originated in the minds of the booters and terminated in their pockets. And the innocent inhabitants of those counties paid for many years the obligations created by this gang of as shameless scoundrels that ever cheated a halter. When the few real inhabitants of Barber found out what had been done, they captured the board of self-constituted and rascally commissioners and intimated that within a few brief moments, they, the commissioners, would all be swinging from a convenient cottonwood tree. The mistake that the Committee of Vengeance made was to allow those commissioners to talk. Kansas has never produced smoother or more seductive liars than the early organizers of county governments in southwest Kansas. They did not claim that they were innocent. That would have simply irritated their captors and insulted their intelligence. They simply assured the committee of regulators that if they were let alone, they would quietly leave the county. They intimated that if they were killed, it would do the killers no good and might get them into more or less trouble. While if they were be let go, there might be a chance they could get some of the stealings back. Well, the talk prevailed, and the commissioners and the county clerk were allowed to go away, and they went, took with them the county seal, and at the safe distance of Hutchinson, they organized themselves into a board and proceeded to issue thousands of dollars of fresh indebtedness against the county, obligations which the county, after years of weary and fruitless litigation, was forced to assume. According to McNeil, quote, these organizers of fraudulent county governments had cheeks of brass and gall that passed all understanding. One Andrew Mowry, he continued, said, who had loaded on the school fund of the state thousands of utterly valueless bonds of mythical school districts in the fraudulent county of Comanche, districts that had neither schoolhouses nor children, districts in which there was no property, either real or personal, and whose only inhabitants were the buffaloes, the coyotes, the prairie dogs, and rattlesnakes, had the hardihood to go to Topeka with a pretended certificate of election as representatives of Comanche County. And after the fraudulent elections that took place, fraudulent organizations that took place in Barber, Comanche, Ford, and Ness, it was nearly 12 years before the organization of other counties could proceed in southwest Kansas. So it really held things up. In 1874, Edwards County was created and organized out of Kiowa, and Kingman County and Rush County also were organized. Edwards County was named for the fellow over here on the far left, W.C. Edwards. He was a Reno County businessman who owned much land in the area and built the first brick building in Kinsley, which is today the county seat of Edwards County. According to an article in the Kinsley newspaper in 1879, he agreed to build that building and give it to the new county if they named it after him. So there you go. All you got to do is build a building, right? Kingman was named for then Kansas Supreme Court Chief Justice Samuel Kingman, right there. And Rush County was named for another soldier, Captain Alexander Rush. That's where La Crosse is, if you're thinking about on the map, Rush County. And he was, Rush was killed also at Jenkins Ferry, Arkansas in 1864, like several of the others. You remember, I mean, we were talking about Godfrey, and then Seward went out down in southeast Kansas. It was originally created in 1855 as Godfroy, and then it was later divided up into Elk and Chautauqua. But it had Seward on it first. I think I mentioned that earlier. And then 6 years later, in 1867, when all of those other Union generals' names were put into newly created counties. Seward was moved out west, and Howard, this guy right here, Oliver Otis Howard's name was temporarily put on those, where those two counties are now. He was a Union Corps commander during the Civil War. He was at Gettysburg, and he is also the namesake of Howard University in Washington, D.C. But then in the fall in 1875, that oversized county of Howard was split in two into what's today Elk and Chautauqua. Elk was named after the river that flows through it, and Chautauqua was named for the same county in the state of New York that was the birthplace of Edward Jaquins, who was a member of the Kansas House at the time, and he wanted to have his home county back in New York put on this county in Kansas. And just for fun, the New York County in turn derives its name from an Indian word meaning foggy place. That's what Chautauqua translates it into. Don't ask me why. In 1881, Gray County was created. This is Alfred Gray up here, and Gray County right down there. In honor of Alfred Gray, late Secretary of the State Board of Agriculture. Wallace County out here, which was really those two counties right there at the time. Wallace County was recreated by halving it, cutting it in half, its original size, and the other half being temporarily named for the 8th governor of Kansas, this man up here, John P. St. John. He was a Republican, but then he switched parties and became the candidate for president on the Prohibition Party in the mid-1880s. And so after they had put his name on the county, they decided he'd kind of been a traitor, and so they took his name off the county, and they put this guy's name, General John Logan, who was another favorite general of Sherman's during the Civil War, who was also a United States Senator, and they put his name on that. That's the county where Oakley, Kansas is today. Okay. Garfield, Gray, Haskell, and Stanton counties were organized in 1887. Garfield was named for President Garfield up here, Garfield. It went away though because it was illegally organized, and it was just absorbed into this county of Finney County. And then Haskell County was named for Dudley C. Haskell, right there. There's Dudley C. Haskell. He was the late congressman, one of our very first congressmen from Lawrence, Dudley C. Haskell. And then Finney County, I mentioned earlier right here, was named for this man down here, Kansas Lieutenant Governor D.W. Finney at the time. He was the Lieutenant Governor at the time that the county was named. Also, going back to Davis, who talked to me about Davis County? Davis County. Davis was one of the very first counties named, but he was a Confederate, right? So at the very end of this whole process, Davis's name was taken off of his county right here, and former Union general, and he was at Gettysburg too, John Geary, had his name was put on this area called Geary County, which is where Junction City is today. He was also a Kansas territorial governor in the early days of Kansas. So as you can see through the naming of the Kansas counties and their formation, that Bleeding Kansas, the subsequent American Civil War that Kansas helped start, and the unfolding history of our state and country are forever intertwined, symbolized, and memorialized in our Kansas County names and name selection process. The struggle for Kansas's heart and soul through its place names, who would be honored and who would be cast aside later, the problems of county creation to actual county organization, were indicative of the slow, sometimes political, sometimes fraudulent, sometimes dastardly evolution of county creation that mirrored the slow growth of rural life in our state. On the journey of 38 years or so, from 1855 to 1893, 137 names were adopted, discarded, reemerged, or relocated, with about 3/4 of them becoming permanent names. All are part of our heritage, and some, along with the evolutionary process, have been largely forgotten, but resurrected now to be celebrated and remembered this evening. Thank you for letting me share it with you. Glad to answer any questions.
Jim,
Yep.
one question and then a couple of fun tie-ins for you since you're a Civil War guy. Rooks County, it was my understanding that John C. Rooks, who actually was called Calvin Rooks instead of John, that was the only Kansas county that was named after a private. And you had two up there in your 67.
Yeah, there were a few, a couple others, yeah. And there were some captains and, corporals, yeah.
Rooks took a chest wound at Prairie Grove on the 7th of December, died in Fayetteville on the 11th, and supposedly his final words were, I serve my Redeemer in life that he may save me in death.
Wow.
Gove County,
Yes.
Grenville, Llewellyn Gove.
Yes.
And his father was Moses Gove, and and back to Rooks for just a moment. Company I of the 11th Kansas from Grasshopper Falls, from Sauterelle.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Grenville, Llewellyn Gove, captain of Company G of the 11th. You can't tell that I'm an 11th Kansas nut. Father was one of the first mayors of Manhattan, Moses Gove. The Manhattan GAR chapter was named Lou Gove chapter in honor of Grenville, Llewellyn Gove.
It's a small state, isn't it? It's a small world, yeah. But so many of those soldiers were honored by the people who served in the Kansas legislature who had fought with them, and they wanted to honor the guys that had shouldered arms with them, and that's why there's so many, they're generals, of course, but a lot of them are just regular soldiers that they knew.
And it was actually McAfee who was adjutant general at the time, and he was a member of the 11th.
Oh, wow. That's good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, for sure. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say that the city of Harper was the county seat in Harper, and the city of Anthony came in the night and stole the documents and sent them to Anthony, and now Anthony is the county seat because they stole
Stole
the
it. Yeah, and that happened. I cannot tell you how many times that happened in other.
In other counties?
What's that?
In
Other counties, yeah. Oh gosh, I'm trying. Greenburg, Kansas, Kiowa County's county seat. It was in a place called Jane, and Colonel Green, he wanted to have the county seat, so he just went over in the middle of the night and took all the county records, and in the morning he had them, the next day. So, and they called the place Greenburg.
A lot of people got killed during that time. I was reading books about ghost towns in Kansas, and they tried to change the boundaries, and then they got to fight over where the courthouse is supposed to be, and people got shot over, and it was quite a rough time back then.
There's a great book called Bullets and Ballots that tells some of those stories, but this is an interesting story and all, but the story on county seats is really good, and I wish, there needs to be a book written about all, because there are so many, it was a war in every county, all
Well,
counties.
yeah, and then so many of those towns formed, and then when the railroad came through, well, they just disappeared.
Yeah, exactly. And one county we talked about out in Logan County, Oakley is now the county seat, but it was in a different town in the center of the state. I want to say something Springs, Russell Springs maybe was the name of it. It was a town in the middle of the county, and it was the county seat, and it had a county courthouse, but when they built the highway north up through Oakley, the population almost completely flipped, and Oakley had all the population, and they ended up changing the county seat. So a lot of things happened like that too. So, but that's a whole other subject. Sorry about that.
Let's give him a really... When you and I were classmates in high school history, I didn't think I learned a thing. Because when I listen to a speaker like you, I think, I didn't know that. I didn't even really realize that part of, eastern part of our state was that pro-slavery.
Yeah.
How many of you were surprised at that also?
Could you feel it shift though from pro-slavery to union name? So.
My grandfather transported slaves out of the state. wagon that had a tape floor. And I was a little kid. I remember seeing it even. But, and then I asked my family later, years, I said, did anybody see that wagon? And nobody even knew about it. So my grandfather and I were close, very close.
Yeah. Thank you. See you.